Biblio Studio presents Unstoppable, the Mind That Achieves Everything. Chapter 1. The Awakening of the Unstoppable Mind. The chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they are too strong to be broken. Samuel Johnson. Most people don't realize they are trapped in an invisible net. A net made of small decisions, daily repetitions, gestures so automatic they seem harmless. Yet those small repetitions build a wall around our minds. When Johnson spoke of the chains of habit, he wasn't exaggerating. What begins as a simple thread we hardly notice becomes, over time, a strong shackle. Coffee at the same hour, the repeated excuse for not starting that project, the predictable reaction to criticism, the inner voice that always replies with, "I can't." All of that accumulates until it forms a prison. And the most dangerous part is that it's a comfortable prison. The awakening of an unstoppable mind begins the moment you perceive that prison. It's not when you read a book, nor when you attend a motivational talk, nor even when you achieve an important goal. True awakening happens when you feel discomfort within your routine, that prick of unease that tells you something doesn't fit, that maybe you're replaying life as if you were just a spectator in your own movie. That's when a question arises that can shake you. Is this all I can become? Whoever dares to ask that question has already begun to break a link in those invisible chains. During the Bosnian War in the 1990s, Sarajevo became a symbol of destruction and suffering. Amid the chaos, a group of citizens made a decision that seemed absurd. They risked their lives to rescue books from the National Library, which burned under the bombs. Why risk their lives for pages of paper when survival was at stake? Because they understood the books were far more than objects. They represented memory, identity, the dignity of a people. In the middle of devastation, preserving knowledge became an act of resistance, a way to remember that they were more than victims. They were still human, with history and culture. That episode holds a powerful lesson. Awakening means daring to protect what is essential within you, even when the world around you seems to collapse. You may not be in the middle of a war, but you're in the midst of daily battles, social pressure, fear of failure, the habit of settling. Each time you choose to rescue your deepest values, your forgotten dreams, your genuine passion, you are doing what those citizens did, saving your inner library before the bombs of routine consume it. The paradox of the ship of Theseus helps us understand this process even more. Imagine a ship loses one of its planks, which is replaced with a new one, then another and another, until all have been replaced. Is it still the same ship? Philosophers have debated this for centuries, and the question remains open. But what's truly interesting is what it teaches us about ourselves. Are you still the same person after all the changes you've lived through? Your body is not the same as in childhood. Your mind doesn't think as it did 10 years ago. Your life is made of pieces replaced again and again. And yet, you are still you. This paradox holds an inspiring message. You can always renew yourself without ceasing to be yourself. You can replace beliefs that no longer serve you, habits that limit you, relationships that drain you, and still recognize yourself in the mirror. You don't lose your essence by changing. On the contrary, you refine it. True awakening consists in accepting that transformation doesn't destroy your identity, it strengthens it. The problem is that we cling to rusty pieces out of fear. We prefer to stick with what's familiar, even if it's broken, rather than risk changing. We tell ourselves things like, "I've always been like this," or "It's too late for me," as if we were a ship condemned to sink with its old planks. But nothing could be further from the truth. Each day is an opportunity to replace a plank of your ship, to rebuild yourself piece by piece. Identity is not a prison, it's a process in constant motion. The awakening of the unstoppable mind doesn't happen all at once. It's not a lightning bolt that changes everything. Sometimes it arrives in tiny moments. It might be that morning when you decide to go for a walk instead of staying in bed. It might be when you respond calmly instead of exploding at criticism, or when you choose to read something that challenges your thinking instead of letting yourself be dragged into empty distractions. Those gestures, so small they seem irrelevant, are the ones that begin to weaken the chains of habit. And when they add up, they transform your life completely. What's essential is that you begin to live awake. Don't allow habits to decide your destiny. Don't let comfort define your potential. An unstoppable mind doesn't seek a perfect life. It seeks a conscious one. A life in which you choose, not just repeat. In which you decide to protect what is valuable, even if it seems absurd, like those citizens who saved books in Sarajevo. In which you accept that you are always under construction, like the ship of Theseus sailing with new planks but the same mission to move forward. Today, as you read these lines, you face the same choice millions of people have faced at different moments in their lives, to continue asleep in habit or to dare to awaken. The first path is more comfortable, safer, more predictable. The second is more uncomfortable, more uncertain, but infinitely more alive. Awakening doesn't mean you suddenly understand everything. It means you decide to stop living on autopilot. The chains of habit will always be lurking, trying to regain their strength. But each time you choose consciously, each time you replace a piece of your ship, each time you protect what is essential within you, those chains weaken. And one day you realize they no longer imprison you, that you are free to reinvent yourself, to move forward, to achieve what once seemed impossible. The unstoppable mind is not built in an instant. It awakens in every decision you make. Perhaps the world won't change immediately around you, but what will change is the way you face it. And that change, though it may seem small, is enough to begin a journey with no return. Awakening is not the end, it is the beginning, the first step toward everything you can become. Chapter 2. Believe before you see. No one is as poor as the one who has no dream. Dreaming is free, some say, often with a dismissive tone, as if dreams were a useless luxury that only entertains the naive. But the truth is that dreams are the raw material of every achievement. A mind without dreams is like a body without oxygen. It survives, but it does not live. The most curious thing is that most people don't give up on their dreams because they are impossible, but because they see them as too big for their reality. The world has taught us to measure our ambitions by what we see, not by what we believe possible. And there lies the great trap. The visible never comes before the invisible. First comes the dream, then the reality. To believe before you see means to bet on something that does not yet exist. It means giving more value to inner vision than to external evidence. Imagine for a moment an inventor who only allowed himself to be guided by what was already proven. There would never be innovation. Imagine an artist who only painted what already existed. There would never be new art. Imagine a child who never allowed themselves to dream. They would live trapped in the monotony that adults call realism. The deepest poverty is not the lack of money or resources, it is the inability to dream. When there is no dream pulling you forward, any obstacle becomes an impossible wall to climb. An often forgotten example that perfectly reflects this power of dreaming before seeing is Charles Daniels, a young American swimmer who, in 1904, forever changed the sport of swimming. Until then, competitions were slow and rigid, using traditional strokes like the trudgeon or variations of breaststroke. Daniels, by observing and experimenting, introduced a different technique, the crawl, alternating arm movements combined with quick kicks. What now seems normal in any pool was, at the time, seen as strange, even ridiculous. Yet that innovation made him the first great American Olympic swimming champion and revolutionized the way the sport was understood. Daniels had to believe in his vision before it was validated by others. Had he waited for general approval, he would never have taken the leap that led him to make history. And the same happens to us outside the water. How many times have you had an idea, a desire, or a project that seemed too odd or risky to share? You hide it because you fear mockery or rejection, and you let it die in silence. But what we forget is that every innovation, every conquest, every dream worth pursuing begins by seeming absurd. The secret of unstoppable minds is that they dare to hold on to that inner vision even when the world does not yet understand it. However, here another curious phenomenon comes into play: the paradox of choice. The more options we have, the harder it is for us to decide. It may sound contradictory, because we usually think that an abundance of options is a privilege. But reality shows otherwise. Too many options paralyze us. It's like walking into an enormous bookstore and not knowing which book to choose, or staring at an endless menu and ending up ordering the same thing as always. In life, this translates into dreams that never leave the page because we spend our time comparing, doubting, and postponing. We want so many things that we don't commit to any of them. This is where believing before seeing becomes even more important. If you don't have a clear vision of what you want, you will get lost in the maze of options. When your dream is strong, options stop being a burden and become tools. It doesn't matter if you have 100 paths in front of you. You choose the one most aligned with your vision and move forward. But when there is no defined dream, options become excuses to remain still. An unstoppable mind does not fear choosing because it knows that every decision is a declaration of faith in its vision. The paradox of choice also teaches us something deeper. The real problem is not choosing wrongly, but not choosing at all. Dreams are not built from passivity, but from action. If Charles Daniels had waited for someone to confirm the best technique, he would never have invented the crawl. He chose to take a risk. He chose to try. He chose to trust what he saw inside his mind before others could see it. That is the essence of believing before seeing, acting as if the invisible already existed. Perhaps you too are caught in that paradox right now. You know you want to improve your life, but you haven't decided whether to focus on a project, a relationship, a journey, or personal discipline. And in the midst of so many options, you remain motionless. The question you must ask yourself is not, what is the perfect option, but which dream resonates most deeply within me? The answer is not measured by logic, but by vibration. You will know it because, even if it scares you, it also excites you. That mixture of fear and enthusiasm is the compass pointing toward your true dream. To believe before you see is, ultimately, an act of courage. It means walking when the path doesn't yet exist, trusting that each step will carve it. It means giving value to your intuition, your vision, and your deepest desire, even when no one else understands. It is not a blind leap, as some think. It is a leap based on an inner certainty that doesn't yet need external proof. It is the same certainty that pushes a swimmer to change the history of his sport, an inventor to challenge known laws, or an ordinary dreamer to transform an ordinary life into something extraordinary. When you think dreaming is naive, remember that everything you take for granted today began as someone else's dream. The airplane, electricity, the music you listen to, even the way you read these words on a screen, all of it first existed in the mind of someone who dared to believe before they saw. The same is true for you. That project, that change, that challenge that now exists only in your imagination can become your reality if you decide to protect it, sustain it, and act accordingly. Do not let the paradox of choice paralyze you. Do not fall into the trap of waiting for external proof before believing. And never forget that the greatest poverty is not what is missing outside, but what is missing inside. A dream that gives you direction. Whoever has a dream has a map, a reason, and a destination. Whoever does not has no path, even if surrounded by all the opportunities in the world. Today could be the day you begin to believe before you see. You don't need guarantees. You don't need others to understand. You only need a dream strong enough to propel you forward. Because as the saying goes, no one is as poor as the one who has no dream. And you were not born to be poor in spirit. You were born to be unstoppable. Chapter 3. Breaking Through the Impossible. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Friedrich Nietzsche. There are moments when life pushes us against a wall that seems unbreakable, obstacles that appear larger than our strength, challenges that surpass our visible capacities. And yet, time and again, history shows us that the impossible is nothing but an illusion. Nietzsche was right. When a human being finds a powerful purpose, they can endure the unbearable, withstand the unthinkable, and achieve what once seemed impossible. It is not the how that sustains us, but the why. The path may be painful, confusing, and dark, but clarity of purpose is a lamp that shines even in the longest night. Think of the Hungarian physician Ignaz Semmelweis. In the 19th century, he worked in overcrowded hospitals where women died en masse after childbirth from what was called puerperal fever. Mortality rates were terrifying. While his colleagues attributed the deaths to mysterious or inevitable causes, Semmelweis observed something simple. The doctors who assisted in births were the same ones who, moments earlier, had dissected corpses in the autopsy room without washing their hands. His intuition led him to a revolutionary conclusion. Perhaps it was they themselves who were transmitting the disease. His proposal was as simple as it was radical: washing hands with a disinfectant solution before touching patients. The result was immediate and astonishing. Mortality plummeted. But instead of being recognized, Semmelweis was ridiculed, attacked, and marginalized. His colleagues called him insane, his ideas were deemed absurd, and the medical community rejected him for years. He died without seeing his discovery accepted, though decades later, medicine would recognize him as a pioneer of antisepsis. Semmelweis embodies the essence of breaking through the impossible, facing ridicule, scorn, and rejection for the sake of defending a truth he saw clearly. His why was to save lives, and that allowed him to endure a how made of humiliation and loneliness. Breaking the impossible doesn't always mean confronting the incomprehension of the scientific world. Sometimes it means fighting invisible battles against the irrationality of the human mind. In 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a phenomenon occurred that still baffles historians and doctors, the so-called dancing plague. It began when a woman started dancing uncontrollably in the street. Soon dozens joined, then hundreds. They danced day and night, unable to stop, until many collapsed from exhaustion and some even died. Authorities, believing it was some kind of curse or possession, tried unusual solutions, such as hiring musicians to satisfy the frenzy with more dancing, which only worsened the situation. Today, it is thought that it may have been a case of mass hysteria caused by stress, hunger, and superstition. But beyond the medical or social explanation, what the dancing plague shows us is how far the human mind can go in making the impossible real, for better or for worse. Who would have imagined that hundreds of people could dance themselves to death, unable to stop? This absurd and tragic episode demonstrates that the mind, when dragged by irrational beliefs or impulses, can destroy the body. But at the same time, it also proves that what we think is impossible, whether for good or ill, can become reality if the mind sustains it with enough force. So what sets apart those who manage to break through impossible barriers from those who remain trapped by them? The answer lies in purpose. The why Nietzsche spoke of is not a romantic idea. It is a real force. It is what gives meaning to standing up when everything urges you to stay on the ground. It is what made someone like Semmelweis endure the humiliation of an entire scientific community. It is what keeps us from falling into Strasbourg's collective madness, having a purpose so clear that neither fear, nor social pressure, nor mental fatigue can divert us. The impossible is shattered when your why is stronger than your fear. If your purpose is weak, any difficulty will make you give up. But when your purpose is immense, every blow becomes fuel. Think about it. What sustains you when everything seems to collapse? What cause, dream, or ideal is so strong within you that you would be willing to endure mockery, rejection, failure, or sleepless nights of doubt just to keep it alive? That answer is your key to breaking through the impossible. Breaking the impossible does not mean the world will applaud you right away. On the contrary, it often means enduring criticism, loneliness, and misunderstanding. Humanity's great advances always began with someone labeled as crazy or naive. The problem is that most people give up too soon, not because the obstacle is unbeatable, but because the why wasn't strong enough. If your dream is built only on comfort and ego, it will die as soon as the first difficulties appear. But if your dream is built on true purpose, there will be no wall you won't try to break through, no night you cannot endure. Think about your own life. How many times have you considered something impossible before even trying it? How many projects, goals, or desires have you let die because they seemed too big? The truth is that almost nothing is impossible. What is often missing is a reason strong enough to bear the journey. When your why is weak, everything feels heavy. When your why is strong, everything weighs less. Nietzsche summed it up with brutal clarity. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Strength does not come from technique or external resources, but from that inner voice that knows why you fight. Semmelweis heard it when he insisted that mothers' lives depended on something as simple as washing hands. The people of Strasbourg remind us of the dark side. Without purpose, the mind can drag us into a collective delirium that seems unbreakable. You decide which side to stand on, the side of those who break the impossible or the side of those who get lost in it. Never forget that your mind is more powerful than you imagine. It can condemn you to dance to death in meaningless frenzy, or it can drive you to transform the world despite universal rejection. The difference lies in your purpose, in your why, and if you find it, the impossible will no longer be a wall. It will be just another challenge on the path to what you truly want to build. Chapter 4. The Power of the Invisible. He who says it is impossible should not interrupt the one who is already doing it. Arabic proverb. The world is full of voices that speak of the impossible. Voices that tell you that you can't, that it's too late, that you don't have what it takes, that it's not worth trying. The curious thing is that these voices usually come from people who never tried themselves. They rely on the visible, on resources, on statistics, on what seems logical. But what is truly powerful cannot be seen. It is invisible. And yet, it moves the world. The power of the invisible lies in everything that sustains an action before it bears fruit. Faith in oneself, determination, patience, silent discipline. No one can measure these things from the outside, but they are what make the difference. The visible is the result, the achievement, the recognition, the goal accomplished. The invisible is the process, the days of solitary effort, the calculations in a notebook, the hours of practice no one applauds. And yet, one cannot exist without the other. Few stories reflect this invisible strength, as well as that of Katherine Johnson, the mathematician who worked at NASA at a time when neither science nor society was ready to accept a woman in such a crucial role. Johnson calculated the trajectories that allowed John Glenn to orbit the Earth in 1962 and later contributed to the missions that took humans to the Moon. In a world dominated by men and in an era marked by segregation, her presence in those rooms was almost invisible. But her talent could not remain hidden forever. Glenn himself explicitly requested that she be the one to verify the computer's calculations before stepping into the capsule. Imagine the scene: millions awaiting the launch, the pressure of the Cold War, and an astronaut's life depending on equations handwritten by a woman who, outside that room, was not even allowed to enter certain places. What was invisible to most, her genius, her precision, her perseverance, became the piece that sustained one of humanity's greatest achievements. Katherine Johnson proved that you don't need the world to see you in order to be essential. The power of the invisible acts even when no one recognizes it. And the same is true in every life. Perhaps your effort today is invisible to everyone. Those hours you dedicate to learning something new, that habit you cultivate without anyone noticing, that project you write in secret. But the invisible does not stop being real. In fact, it is more powerful because it works in silence, accumulates energy, and strengthens away from the eyes of others. When the time comes, it will be what sustains your visible triumph. The power of the invisible also manifests itself in unexpected places. Iceland, for example, is a small, isolated country with a tiny population. And yet, it is the nation where more books are sold per capita than anywhere else in the world. There, literature is not a luxury but part of national identity. In every Icelandic family, it is common to find authors, voracious readers, carefully produced editions. Every Christmas they celebrate Jólabókaflóð, the flood of books, where giving a book becomes a cultural ritual. What's interesting is that this love for reading is not imposed by big political campaigns or flashy speeches. It is invisible at its origin, born of tradition, of a way of understanding life, of a quiet appreciation for the written word. That invisible force has shaped an entire people, has fueled their creativity, and has sustained their ability to thrive in a harsh land. What might be a detail in other countries is, for Iceland, a root. In the same way, what you plant inside yourself, even if it seems invisible, can transform your life more than you imagine. The books you read, the conversations you choose to have, the beliefs you nurture, all of these work at a level unseen, yet they build the foundation of your identity. The visible will be your success, but the invisible will always be your foundation. There is a trap many fall into, believing that only what is seen counts. We crave applause, immediate results, recognition. But life is built like a mountain. What rises toward the sky is sustained only because there are roots hidden underground. When someone tells you it's impossible, don't listen. Remember the proverb, don't let those who never try interrupt those who are already doing it. You don't need your effort to be visible to everyone, only strong enough for you to sustain it until it blooms. Perhaps today your struggle resembles Katherine Johnson's, solving invisible equations, facing silent obstacles, working in a room where no one believes you belong. Perhaps your life carries something Icelandic within it, invisible values that, without you even realizing it, are becoming your greatest strength. Do not underestimate what is unseen, because that is where all greatness begins. The power of the invisible also resides in your thoughts. Each idea you choose to nurture is like a book you decide to keep in your inner library. If you fill your shelves with doubts and fears, that will be what sustains you. But if you fill them with dreams, lessons, and confidence, one day your mind will be like Iceland, a fertile land where books, visions, and possibilities flourish. In the end, the invisible is what separates those who give up from those who persist. The effort no one sees, the conviction no one understands, the discipline no one applauds, all of that builds the foundation of the future. The day your dream becomes visible, many will say it was luck, that it was chance. They won't understand that what they see is only the tip of the iceberg, and that what truly sustained you lay beneath the surface, invisible to all but you. So when someone tries to convince you it's impossible, smile in silence. Don't waste energy convincing them. Your mission is not to justify yourself. Your mission is to keep building in the invisible, because the day your effort blooms, the evidence will be undeniable. And then, like Katherine Johnson, like Iceland, like so many others who believed before they were seen, you will discover that the invisible not only has power, it is the true source of everything that matters. Chapter 5. Resilience in Action. If you don't make a choice, the choice will be made for you. Life always places us at crossroads, and the curious thing is that even when we decide not to decide, we are already choosing. Passivity is also a choice, though we prefer to believe it isn't. And within those silent decisions often lies the difference between moving forward or getting stuck, between surviving or giving up. Resilience begins there, in recognizing that you play an active role in your destiny, even when the path seems beyond your control. Resilience is not about enduring for the sake of enduring, nor resisting as if by closing your eyes and waiting for the storm to pass. True resilience is conscious action in the midst of adversity. It is saying, I cannot control what happens, but I can decide how to respond. And that decision, though it may seem small, radically changes the outcome. An extraordinary example of this collective resilience occurred in 1665 in the English village of Eyam. When the bubonic plague reached the town, the situation was terrifying. The disease spread rapidly, and neighboring villages feared the contagion would wipe out the entire region. It was then that the inhabitants of Eyam made a decision that seems almost superhuman. They voluntarily confined themselves, completely isolating their village to prevent the plague from escaping its borders. Think of the magnitude of that choice. They knew many would die. They knew confinement was practically a death sentence, but they chose to sacrifice themselves to protect others. For more than a year, they endured isolation, fear, and the deaths of friends and family. But thanks to their decision, the plague did not spread beyond their boundaries, and many neighboring communities were saved. That resilience was not passive. It was a conscious act of courage. They chose to bear immense suffering in the name of a greater purpose. They chose not to let the plague dictate their destiny, but to decide how they would face it. Resilience, in the end, is not measured by how much pain you endure, but by the strength with which you choose to remain faithful to what you consider essential. And that same principle can be applied to your life. Your decisions may not be as drastic as Eyam's, but there will be moments when you must choose to stay trapped in the comfort that limits you, or to dare to change, to yield to external pressure, or to uphold your inner vision. Each decision is an act of resilience. But resilience does not always mean sacrifice. Sometimes it manifests in unexpected forms, like the story of a Filipino fisherman who, for years, kept under his bed what he thought was a worthless rock. He used it as a charm, or simply as a curious object. The surprising truth was that, later, it was discovered that this was no ordinary stone, but the largest natural pearl ever found, over 30 kilos in weight. He had slept every night on top of an incalculable fortune without realizing it. This anecdote, though very different from Eyam's tragedy, contains another lesson about resilience. Sometimes the wealth, strength, and resources we need are already with us, even if we don't recognize them. Resilience is not only enduring the storm, it is also learning to see what we already have and use it. The fisherman had under his bed a treasure that could have transformed his life, but he ignored it. How many times do we do the same with our talents, our creativity, our ability to rise again and again? We hide under the bed what could move us forward because we believe it isn't worth much. To be resilient is to look under your own bed and recognize the pearl you've been ignoring. Perhaps it is a skill you never dared to show, a passion you left asleep, a lesson you learned in silence. Resilience is not only about withstanding blows, it is also about recognizing what is valuable in you and using it as a lever to keep going. When you put the two stories together, the one of Am and the one of the fisherman, a powerful truth emerges. Resilience always involves choice. The people of Am chose to sacrifice themselves to save others, and that heroic act was etched into history. The fisherman chose, albeit unknowingly, to ignore what he had, and it took him years to recognize his treasure. In both cases, decisions made the difference, because if you don't choose, life will choose for you, and life rarely chooses in your favor when you are afraid to act. Think of the times inertia has led you to endure situations you did not deserve, a job that doesn't fulfill you, a relationship that drains you, a habit that slowly destroys you. Not deciding is also a form of deciding to stay there, waiting for something to change on its own. But nothing changes until you choose. Resilience is not waiting, it is actively choosing in the midst of difficulty. Of course, choosing does not always guarantee immediate results. The inhabitants of Am did not save all their neighbors. Many died within those borders. The fisherman did not become rich the instant he discovered the pearl. The wealth was there, but it still required action to turn it into reality. Resilience is action with patience. It is choosing today even if the fruit takes time to arrive. When you look at your life and see obstacles, remember these two images. A village that chose to sacrifice itself to give life to others, and a man who slept on a fortune without realizing it. One teaches you that resilience can demand collective heroism, the other that it can demand awareness of what you already possess. Both remind you that the key is to choose consciously. So ask yourself, what plague are you tolerating out of fear of deciding? What pearl do you have hidden under your mental bed without recognizing it? Resilience begins with those uncomfortable questions. It is not about enduring life as it comes, but about choosing how you want to live it. And that choice, even if it is hard or takes time to bear fruit, will always be better than letting others, or chance, decide for you. Breaking inertia, rescuing what is valuable, enduring with purpose, that is the essence of resilience in action. And it is also how your mind becomes unstoppable. Because when you choose, even in the middle of the storm, you stop being a victim of circumstance and become the architect of your destiny. And that, though invisible, is the force that transforms the impossible into a new beginning. Chapter 6. The discipline that sets you free. You cannot tie the wind, but you can adjust the sails. Portuguese sailor's proverb. Life is, in many ways, like the open sea. You can wish for the wind to blow in your favor, curse when a storm arrives, or sit waiting for the weather to change on its own. But the truth is, you will never have absolute control over the wind. What you can do is adjust your sails. That is the essence of discipline. It is not about controlling the uncontrollable, but about directing what does depend on you. You cannot tie the wind, but you can train your will to move forward even in the midst of chaos. Discipline rarely sounds attractive. It is often confused with rigidity, with lack of freedom, with endless sacrifice. But in reality, it is the opposite. Discipline, rightly understood, is the purest form of freedom, because when you are disciplined, you are not at the mercy of whims of the moment or fleeting impulses. You decide where to set your sails, regardless of which way the wind blows, and that ability to choose consistently is what liberates you. One of the most striking examples of discipline at its highest expression can be found in the musicians of the Titanic. On April 14, 1912, as the ship sank after striking an iceberg and panic spread among passengers and crew, a small group of musicians made an unusual decision. They kept playing. There was no hope of saving the Titanic. The freezing waters of the North Atlantic were a death sentence for many, and yet these men chose to remain standing, instruments in hand, playing melodies to calm the terror of others. It wasn't about denying the tragedy, nor distracting themselves from their own inevitable fate. It was discipline, holding to their purpose until the very end. They had been hired to provide music on board, and they did so to the last moment, not because anyone demanded it, but because they understood it was their duty and embraced it with unbreakable dignity. They played until the water reached the deck and the notes died with them. Their act of discipline did not save the ship, but it did bring serenity in the midst of chaos, and that serenity still inspires generations who remember their courage. Discipline is not always heroic or dramatic. More often, it is expressed in small gestures, repeated day after day, invisible to others. But within that silent repetition lies its power. It is like life aboard the International Space Station, where astronauts see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every day. For most of us, such constant shifts between light and darkness would be disorienting, even unbearable. But astronauts cannot rely on what they see outside. They need strict discipline to maintain precise routines, sleep schedules, daily exercise, controlled diets, and meticulous work. It doesn't matter that the sun rises and sets so many times. They follow an inner order that gives them stability in an environment that, at first glance, would seem impossible to endure. That is another face of discipline. No matter how many sunrises change around you, what matters is the sunrise you decide to sustain within you. If you do not impose an internal order, the external world will drag you into chaos. If you don't choose your habits will end up choosing you. If you don't set your sails, the wind will decide your destiny. Many avoid discipline because they confuse it with rigidity. They think being disciplined means living without joy, as if one were turning into a robot. But true discipline is not a prison. It is a compass. It doesn't take away freedom. It gives direction. Because when you know where to set your sails, no matter how strong the wind blows against you, you will always have a path. Lack of discipline, on the other hand, may feel like freedom in the short term, but in reality, it is slavery to your impulses, your fears, and inertia. The musicians of the Titanic remind us that discipline can uphold dignity even in the fiercest storm. The astronauts aboard the ISS show us that discipline can bring stability to life, even in a space where everything floats and nothing seems fixed. And the sailor's proverb teaches us that the essential thing is not to tie the wind, but to adjust the sails. Three very different scenarios, one single truth. What you cannot control should not worry you as much as what you can train. Ask yourself, which sails are you setting today in your life? Are you letting the wind decide where you go, or are you deciding yourself? Is your discipline serving your purpose, or is your lack of it keeping you spinning in circles? You don't have to live through a tragedy like the Titanic or orbit the Earth to experience the importance of discipline. Every day you face your own winds, distractions, doubts, fears, temptations, and every day you have the opportunity to adjust your sails, to choose with clarity even if you cannot control the weather. Discipline is the force that allows you to stay the course when circumstances change. It does not prevent the storm, but it prevents you from getting lost in it. It does not guarantee calm, but it does guarantee direction. And in the end, that is what sets you free, knowing that, although you cannot control the wind, you have the power to decide where you sail. So don't fear discipline. Embrace it as an ally. Let it be the rudder that guides you, the rope that holds your sails, the music that calms the chaos. And always remember that life is not about waiting for the perfect wind, but about learning to sail with the wind you have. That is the difference between those who drift and those who, despite everything, reach the shore. Chapter 7. Creativity as a Secret Weapon. Everything you need to be great is already within you. There are people who spend their entire lives searching outside for what they already carry within. They look for magic formulas, wait for perfect inspiration, compare themselves to geniuses, and conclude they are not made to create anything valuable. But the truth is that creativity is not a gift reserved for a select few. It is a secret weapon we all carry inside, waiting to be used. It is not in the objects you buy, nor in the books you pile up, nor even in the talents of others you admire. It is in your ability to look at what you already have and transform it into something new. Everything you need to be great is already within you, but if you don't learn to uncover it, it will remain asleep like a hidden treasure. Frida Kahlo understood this better than anyone. Her life was marked by physical pain. A bus accident at 18 left her with injuries that forced her to spend long periods in bed. For most, that situation would have been a sentence, an insurmountable limitation, but she chose to turn her confinement into a creative workshop. She had mirrors installed around her bed so she could see herself from different angles and paint self-portraits. She turned her pain into art, her limitation into expression, her confinement into an infinite universe of colors and symbols. She didn't need a sophisticated studio or a healthy body. Everything she needed was already inside her: a deep gaze, the ability to feel intensely, the urge to express. That is the power of creativity. It does not ask for perfect conditions, it asks for willingness. It does not demand an ideal world, it demands the courage to use what you have at hand. Frida Kahlo could not control her health, but she did control how she responded to it. And by doing so, she transformed her fragility into a strength that still moves the world today. Creativity, in that sense, is a secret weapon against the impossible. It does not erase limits, it turns them into canvas. Leonardo da Vinci did something similar centuries earlier. In 1485, in the heart of the Renaissance, he designed what could be called the first helicopter in history. He drew an artifact with a spiral-shaped rotor that, according to his calculations, could rise into the air. In his time, the technology to build it and the materials to make it work did not exist, but that did not stop him from imagining it. While others settled for what was already known, he dared to project what did not yet exist. That design remained invisible for centuries until, much later, humanity made it real. What's fascinating is that Leonardo didn't need to see a helicopter fly in order to believe in it. He didn't need to wait for someone else to invent it. He carried within himself the ability to observe, to connect ideas, and to transform the impossible into possible. His greatness was not in the era he lived in, but in the way he looked beyond what was visible. And that ability, even if on a smaller scale, is also in you. Creativity is not always about inventing a helicopter, but about daring to think of solutions that do not yet exist around you. If you think about it, both Frida and Leonardo reveal the same truth. Creativity is the force that turns adversity into opportunity and imagination into future. Frida turned her confinement into paintings of universal significance. Leonardo turned the limitations of his time into visions that anticipated centuries of progress. Neither of them waited for external conditions. Both looked within and found there what they needed. The mistake many make is to think creativity is a luxury reserved for artists, inventors, or geniuses. Nothing could be further from the truth. Creativity is a secret weapon we all need to face daily challenges. It is in how you organize your day when time seems too short. It is in the words you find to calm someone in the middle of an argument. It is in the resource you invent when you don't have all the tools at hand. It is creativity when you choose to see a difficulty from another angle and discover an unexpected way out. Creativity is also the ability to connect what seems separate. Leonardo observed the flight of birds and connected it with his mechanical sketches. Frida observed her physical pain and connected it with colors and symbols. You can observe your own problems and connect them with past lessons, with the experiences of others, with intuitions that seemed dormant. That crossing of paths is what gives birth to something new. And the new, however small, can be the spark that changes your course. The most interesting thing is that creativity grows with use. It is not a lone spark that appears from time to time. It is a muscle that strengthens as you exercise it. Every time you dare to think differently, to look for an unexpected solution, to risk doing something new, you are training your creativity. And the more you train it, the more available it will be when you truly need it. Remember that life is not only about resisting or enduring, it is also about creating, about transforming what seems limited into something expansive, about finding beauty in pain and future in scarcity, about looking within yourself and discovering that even when the world tells you that you cannot, there is always something you can do. That something is creativity in action. You may not have mirrors around your bed like Frida, nor a sketchbook like Leonardo, but you have your mind, your vision, and your ability to imagine, and that is enough. Everything you need to be great is already within you. Do not underestimate the power of that truth, because every time you choose to use your creativity, you are unfolding a secret weapon that frees you from external limitations and connects you to your inner greatness. Chapter 8. Leadership in the Storm. If you think old, you become old. Tim Grover. Real age is not in the years marked on your calendar, but in the way you choose to think. There are young people trapped in withered thoughts, afraid to take risks, resigned before they even begin. And there are elders with a fiery gaze who inspire with their vitality because they refuse to give up. In the storm, when the wind strikes hardest, leadership is not given by accumulated experience or years lived, but by the mindset with which you choose to respond. If you think old, you become old, even at 20. But if you think with energy and courage, you never truly grow old. True leadership appears in the storm, not in calm. It is easy to look strong when no wind blows, but real leadership is measured in moments when adversity threatens to overwhelm everything. And to understand this, it is enough to remember what happened in the Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union in 1939. The Soviet army was colossal, hundreds of thousands of men, tanks, planes, immense resources. Finland, by contrast, was a small country with only a handful of soldiers, limited supplies, and a brutal winter ahead. By logic, their resistance should have lasted only a few days. Yet the Finns decided not to think like victims or resign themselves to enemy power. Instead of confronting the Soviet tanks head-on, they used what they did have: skis, knowledge of the terrain, and resilience in the cold. Dressed in white, they slid silently through snowy forests, struck by surprise, and vanished before the Soviets could react. Those soldiers proved that leadership in the storm is not always measured by visible strength, but by the ability to think differently. They used snow as an ally, silence as a weapon, and creativity as strategy. The result was that for months, a tiny army managed to stall and disorient a massive power. That war teaches us that leadership does not depend on how many resources you have, but on how you choose to use them. The Finns could have thought old, resigned, defeated before starting, but they chose to think with audacity, as those who still believe everything is possible. And that mindset not only prolonged their resistance, but inspired the entire world. Something similar can be seen in the Spartans of ancient Greece. When facing an enemy, they never asked, "How many are they?" That question implies fear, implies measuring forces, implies assuming that numerical superiority defines the battle. The Spartans instead asked, "Where are the enemies?" Their concern was not the number, but the opportunity. That mental focus was their advantage. They did not let the size of the challenge define their spirit, but directed all their attention toward action. Imagine the difference that shift in questions could make in your own life. When you face a problem and ask yourself, "How much longer?" or "How far am I from achieving it?" you step into the realm of fatigue. You are counting forces, calculating what you lack, weakening yourself with comparisons. But when you ask, "Where is the next step?" or "Where is the opportunity?" you move toward immediate action without wearing yourself down with the size of the obstacle. Leadership in the storm demands that kind of mindset. Less calculation, more action. Less complaining, more movement. Less fear of the enemy's size, more focus on finding its weakness. The storm can take many forms in your life: an economic crisis, an unexpected loss, a radical change in your environment. You may not always be able to choose the wind, but you can decide how to set your sails and how to position yourself against it. The Spartan mentality and the Finnish example show that even in numerical or material disadvantage, the one who leads with boldness can change the course of history. But it is not enough to resist. Leadership in the storm means inspiring. The musicians of the Titanic, whom we saw in another chapter, did not change the fate of the ship, but they changed the experience of those who sank with it. The Finns did not defeat the Soviet Union, but they proved that a small nation could defy a giant. The Spartans did not always emerge victorious, but their attitude set a standard of courage that we still admire today. The leader in the storm does not only act for himself, but transmits to others an energy that keeps them firm. And here, Tim Grover's phrase becomes key once again. If you think old, you become old. A leader cannot afford to think old, resigned, extinguished, without faith. Because if he does, he drags down everyone who follows him into defeat. Leading in the storm is to spread vitality even when the wind cuts the skin. It is to show that there is still one more step, that resistance is still possible, that action is stronger than fear. The next time you find yourself in the middle of your own storm, remember these 3 lessons. First, think young in the sense of keeping the boldness and energy to believe there is still something to do. Second, act like the Finns, using your limited resources with ingenuity instead of lamenting what you lack. Third, ask yourself like the Spartans, not "How much longer?" nor "How many are they?" but "Where is the opportunity?" That approach will not only keep you afloat, but will turn the storm into the very stage where your leadership shines brightest. Because anyone can lead in calm, but only true leaders inspire in chaos. And when you achieve that, no matter how hard the wind blows, your mindset will always be stronger than the storm. Chapter 9. The Price of the Extraordinary. Success is not talent. It is the instinct to do whatever is necessary. We often imagine success as a dazzling result that depends on natural gifts or exceptional talents. We think that those who achieve the extraordinary are privileged by birth, touched by some divine spark. But in reality, what separates those who reach the ordinary from those who achieve the extraordinary is not talent. It is the willingness to pay a price that others are not willing to pay. Talent is a spark. The instinct to do whatever is necessary is the fire. Being extraordinary means embracing invisible sacrifices, difficult decisions, and routines that do not always bring immediate gratification. That instinct to persist, even in adverse circumstances, is what forges great achievements. Few figures symbolize this truth better than Winston Churchill. During World War II, when the weight on his shoulders was crushing, he found a curious escape: watercolor painting. At first glance, painting flowers, landscapes, and peaceful scenes seems incompatible with the man who led Great Britain through one of the darkest eras in history. Yet this habit was his way of releasing tension, of keeping a clear mind in the midst of chaos. Churchill said that painting allowed him to immerse himself in a world where the problems of war did not exist. He did not do it to be recognized as an artist, but because he understood that greatness also requires taking care of inner balance. That detail reveals something essential. The extraordinary is not a facade of perfection. It is a continuous effort to sustain the mind, body, and spirit while advancing in a mission. The price of success lies not only in hours of work and sacrifice, but also in learning how to recharge so as not to fall into despair. Churchill paid that price by allowing himself creative rest, which restored the clarity he needed to make decisions that would affect the fate of millions. But there is another kind of price, perhaps even more surprising: working for a future you may never see. In 1518, long before Gutenberg's printing press popularized printed books, monks in monasteries spent decades copying manuscripts by hand. Imagine the effort, letter by letter, page by page, year after year, without knowing if anyone would ever read those words. Many died before finishing the work they were copying. They did not work for recognition or fame, or even the certainty that their effort would reach someone. Their instinct was simply to do what was necessary to preserve knowledge, even if the fruit of their sacrifice remained invisible to them. That almost inhuman discipline was what kept much of classical wisdom, philosophy, science, and literature alive, knowledge that otherwise would have been lost forever. The scribes never received applause or statues in public squares, but without their silent price, much of the cultural legacy we enjoy today would not exist. They embodied the true instinct of success, to do what must be done, even if no one sees it, even if you receive no credit, even if you never taste the fruit. The extraordinary, in all its forms, demands that willingness. Churchill found in painting the invisible strength that sustained his leadership. The monks found in patient copying the purpose of preserving what others would enjoy centuries later. Both examples remind us that being extraordinary is not about shining brighter than others, but about committing to a purpose even when it hurts, even when it is tedious, even when it seems pointless. The price of the extraordinary is rarely comfortable. It requires sacrificing time you could spend on immediate pleasures. It requires facing misunderstanding from those who do not grasp your dedication. It requires disciplining yourself to a long, often monotonous process where rewards seem distant, but it is precisely that discomfort that filters out the dreamers from the doers. And here the opening phrase comes into play: success is not talent, it is the instinct to do whatever is necessary. Talent may give you a promising start, but only the instinct to persist until the end will allow you to reach the goal. That instinct is not improvised. It is trained in small habits, in daily decisions, in the moments when no one is watching and you keep working anyway. Ask yourself, what price are you willing to pay for the extraordinary, the price of daily consistency, even if no one recognizes it, the price of patience, even if you see no immediate results, the price of caring for your mind and spirit, even if others consider it a waste of time? Churchill and the monks would answer yes, because they understood that the extraordinary is built in the invisible, and perhaps that is the greatest paradox. The price of the extraordinary is not an isolated, painful sacrifice, but a way of life. It is learning to see your effort as part of something greater, even if you don't always enjoy it immediately. It is painting a picture while the world collapses, copying a page when your hands tremble, taking one more step when no strength seems left. The extraordinary is not born, it is built. It does not depend on gifts, but on instincts. It does not consist in waiting for inspiration, but in choosing discipline. And above all, it is not about receiving applause, but about holding on to purpose even when no one is watching. The price may seem high, but the value of the extraordinary is infinite. Chapter 10. The Invincible Mind. Failure is not a wall, it is a camouflaged door. Many people freeze in the face of failure because they interpret it as an ending. They see error, rejection, or defeat as a wall blocking their path. Yet walls, when you look at them from another perspective, often hide disguised doors. What seems like an insurmountable obstacle may actually be the entrance to a new level of learning, to a stronger version of yourself. The difference between those who give up and those who move forward lies in how they view that wall. If you see it as the end, you die there. If you see it as a door, you pass through it and discover a horizon that didn't exist before. The invincible mind is not the one that never fails, but the one that transforms every stumble into a passageway. Failure, in this sense, is not an executioner. It is a teacher in disguise. Whoever understands this does not fear making mistakes, because they know that every fall hands them a new key to open doors that were once closed. An extraordinary example of this mentality can be found in Fauja Singh, a man who defied not only time, but also our perception of human limits. Born in India in 1911, Fauja did not take up serious running until after the age of 80. Yes, you read that right, 80 years old. When most had already accepted that old age was synonymous with resignation, he chose another narrative, and at 100 years old, he became the oldest person ever to complete a marathon, running 26 miles in Toronto. Imagine what that means. At an age when most face ailments, loneliness or dependency, Fauja Singh laced up his shoes and defied time. He did not have the body of a young athlete or the speed of Olympic records, but he had an invincible mind. His story reminds us that the real limit rarely lies in the bones or the muscles. It lies in the mind that decides whether to see failure as a wall or as a door. Could he have failed in the attempt? Of course, he could have been injured, stopped halfway, or not finished at all. But even if that had happened, his story would still be a triumph, because the extraordinary was not in crossing the finish line, but in daring to run when everyone thought it was impossible. His example opens a door for millions, the door to understanding that limits are not inherited, they are chosen. The invincible mind, moreover, not only turns failures into lessons and years into opportunities, it also finds wisdom in nature. Crows, for example, have demonstrated astonishing intelligence. They not only recognize human faces, but also remember those who have harmed them and pass that information on to future generations. If someone hurts them, crows do not forget, and neither do their descendants. This kind of collective memory reveals that resilience and survival do not depend solely on physical strength, but on the mental capacity to learn, to remember, and to share what has been learned. What does this teach us as humans? That the invincible mind does not live isolated within individual experience. It grows stronger when it transforms what has been learned into legacy. What you overcome today is inherited by those who come after you, your child, your student, your team, your community. An invincible mind is not only the one that rises again and again, but also the one that turns every fall into a warning and every achievement into an inspiration. Like crows, your memory can be a beacon for others, preventing them from repeating mistakes and helping them move forward faster. When you combine the image of Fauja Singh running a marathon at 100 with the image of crows transmitting memory to their descendants, a powerful idea emerges. Invincibility is not immortality or perfection. It is persistence with purpose. Fauja teaches us that it is never too late to begin, and the crows remind us that what you learn does not die with you if you choose to share it. The phrase that opens this chapter sums it up. Failure is not a wall, it is a camouflaged door. Every time you stumble, you gain the possibility of learning something that makes you stronger. Every time you choose to rise like Fauja, you turn time into an ally. Every time you share what you have learned, like the crows, you turn your experience into a mental inheritance that others can use. The invincible mind does not deny the existence of pain, fatigue, or difficulty. It is not about pretending there are no walls. It is about training yourself to look for the doors, and that search requires courage, patience, and humility. Courage to stand up when everyone expects you to stay down. Patience to understand that some doors only open with time and perseverance. Humility to accept that what you learn is not just for you, but also for those who will walk after you. So the next time you feel you have failed, change your question. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "Where is the door I didn't see before?" Instead of thinking, "I'm too old to try," remember Fauja Singh lacing up his shoes at 100. And instead of dwelling on the pain of the wound, think like the crows. I will remember this and pass it on so that it may serve others as well. That is the essence of an invincible mind, turning walls into doors, years into opportunities, and memories into legacy. It is not about never falling, but about never refusing to rise again. It is not about being perfect, but about being relentless. It is not about ignoring the walls, but about discovering that behind them there was always a door waiting for you. Chapter 11. The Power of Focus. The silence of your doubts screams louder than the voices of others. We often believe that the greatest obstacles to moving forward are outside of us, other people's criticism, adverse circumstances, external limitations, but the reality is more intimate and relentless. What makes the loudest noise is not what others say, but the deafening silence of our own doubts. That inner whisper repeating, "What if I'm not capable? What if I fail? What if I'm not enough?" Those doubts, when left unchallenged, become shouts that paralyze more than any external voice. That is why focus is so powerful, because it directs your attention toward what you want to achieve instead of allowing doubt to occupy all the space in your mind. Focusing does not mean ignoring problems or pretending distractions don't exist. It means deliberately choosing where to place your energy. The mind, like a magnifying glass, has the ability to concentrate light until it ignites a flame, but only if it stays fixed on one point. If you let scattered doubts divert your gaze, the spark will never catch. Focus is what turns intention into action, action into habit, and habit into achievement. A masterful example of the power of focus was given by Alexander von Humboldt in 1799. He traveled to South America with insatiable curiosity and a discipline of observation that few scientists of his time shared. While other explorers limited themselves to collecting samples or describing landscapes, Humboldt looked for connections. He did not focus on the isolated, but on the interrelated. He discovered links between climate, botany, and geography. He observed how plants grew differently depending on altitude and soil type, how the distribution of vegetation revealed climate patterns, how the earth functioned like an interconnected organism. That focus revolutionized our understanding of nature. Humboldt did not see scattered data. He saw relationships. He did not get lost in meaningless details. He directed his attention to the invisible connections that explained life as a whole. His vision was not only scientific, it was poetic and precise at the same time. The power of his focus lay not in observing more than others, but in observing differently. The same is true in your life. It is not always about working more hours or gathering more information. Many times, it is about focusing your gaze on what is essential, on what truly moves the needle. You can spend years scattered on secondary tasks, or you can decide that your energy will concentrate on that which, like a magnifying glass under the sun, ignites a real fire. In Mongolia, for example, Children learn to ride horses before they learn to read. In a country where nomadic life and vast steppes are part of daily existence, the horse is not a luxury or pastime. It is survival. Riding from a young age is no accident. It is a cultural focus. Without that skill, a child cannot travel, cannot tend livestock, cannot live fully in their environment. That early focus becomes part of their identity and gives them a security that is passed on from generation to generation. Think of the contrast. In many parts of the world, it is considered essential for a child to learn letters as soon as possible. In Mongolia, the focus is different: life first, then the page. It is not that they do not value reading, but they understand that without the essential, everything else loses meaning. That cultural lesson holds a universal truth. Your life changes when you choose to focus first on the essential. But here is the trap. Inner doubts will always try to scatter your gaze. Every time you decide to move forward, your thoughts whisper, "What if you can't?" That inner silence, if not mastered, becomes noise that extinguishes your focus. That is why the opening phrase is key. The silence of your doubts screams louder than the voices of others. You don't need anyone to criticize you. It is enough for your own doubts to speak for you to abandon the path. How do you fight that invisible scream? With focus. By directing your attention again and again toward what matters, like Humboldt, seeing invisible connections in nature, or like Mongolian children, learning to ride before they read. Focus is the antidote to doubt. It is not about eliminating it, but about refusing to give it power. The power of focus does not mean rigidity, it means clarity. Humboldt could have scattered his time across unrelated experiments, but he chose to look at the whole. Mongolians could teach their children many skills, but they chose to prioritize the one that sustains life on the steppes. You can scatter yourself across 1,000 activities, or you can ask, what is essential for my purpose? What is the one thing that, if I master it, changes everything else? These kinds of questions transform your daily life, because in the end, what defines your achievements is not the amount of energy you have, but where you choose to place it. Just as a ray of sunlight can light up an entire room, but only burns when concentrated at a point, your life can either illuminate or ignite depending on your focus. So next time your doubts scream, answer with focus. Next time you feel scattered, remember Humboldt searching for connections in the jungle. Next time you want to give up, think of a Mongolian child who at 5 years old is already riding across the steppe because someone understood that skill was essential. And next time you think failure is inevitable, remember that true failure is not in falling, but in letting doubt extinguish your gaze. The power of focus is not in ignoring the noise, but in not letting it drag you away. It is in listening to your doubts, but not giving them the wheel. It is in directing your energy toward what is essential until your doubts grow tired of screaming and your inner fire remains lit. Chapter 12. Insuperable. The journey continues. A dream that doesn't make you uncomfortable isn't big enough. When you dream of something that doesn't shake you, doesn't make you doubt whether you're capable, doesn't give you vertigo when you imagine it, it probably isn't big enough to transform you. Comfortable dreams are goals disguised as routine. They keep you busy, but they don't take you beyond what you already know. Big dreams, on the other hand, make you uncomfortable because they force you to confront your limitations, to overcome fears, to redefine what you believed was possible. And it is precisely that discomfort that turns a dream into the engine of greatness. The story of the 33 Chilean miners trapped underground in 2010 is a living reminder of what it means to face the impossible and come out transformed. For 69 days, they remained 700 meters underground after the collapse of the San Jose mine. No one on the surface knew for certain if they were alive, and they themselves didn't know if they would ever be rescued. Absolute darkness, suffocating heat, lack of food, and despair could have destroyed them. And yet, they survived. The extraordinary was not only in their rescue, but in the mental discipline they maintained underground. They chose to organize shifts, ration the little food they had, and hold on to faith even when there were no signs of help. Each day was uncomfortable, unbearable, and still they chose not to give up. Their dream was simple, yet enormous: to see sunlight again. That dream made them uncomfortable because every minute seemed to push it further away, but at the same time, it kept them alive. Their journey was not only physical, but also mental. They proved that being insuperable begins within. Something similar happened in 1969 when the Apollo 11 astronauts traveled to the moon. Today it seems like a logical event, part of human history. But at that time, it was a dream that unsettled the entire world. To go beyond the planet, to step onto an unknown surface, to face the possibility of never returning. And they did it with computers less powerful than the phone you carry in your pocket. That means what sustained that journey was not technology, but the mind and courage of those who dared to dream big. Picture the scene. 3 men in a tiny capsule, trusting systems that today would seem rudimentary, launching into the unknown with millions of eyes watching. Every step could have been a fatal mistake, and yet they took the leap. Neil Armstrong described it as one small step for a man, but one giant leap for mankind. That phrase captures the essence of the insuperable. What looks small from the outside can be gigantic from the inside. Both the Chilean miners and the Apollo astronauts teach us that the insuperable does not depend on external conditions, but on the greatness of the dream that drives you. The miners dreamed of returning to the surface, and that dream was uncomfortable because each day seemed to push it farther away. The astronauts dreamed of walking on the moon, and that dream was uncomfortable because it seemed insane at the time. Both faced discomfort, and both proved that discomfort is the price of the extraordinary. And here is the key: being insuperable does not mean reaching a final destination. It means continuing the journey again and again. Every goal achieved opens the door to a bigger goal. Every difficulty overcome awakens a new discomfort that forces you to grow. Discomfort is not a punishment, it is a compass. If something makes you uncomfortable, that is probably the path that can transform you. The journey of your insuperable mind does not end with a visible triumph. It begins again every day, when you choose to rise despite fatigue, when you confront your own inner doubt and decide to move forward, when you choose a dream that makes you uncomfortable because you know within it lies your expansion. Every time you do this, your journey continues. Remember, failure is not a wall, it is a door. Discipline is not a prison, it is freedom. Resilience is not passive endurance, it is conscious action. Creativity is not a luxury, it is a secret weapon. Focus is not rigidity, it is clarity. Every chapter of this journey has been a piece to understand that the insuperable mind is not built in a single blow, but step by step, choice by choice. Perhaps your storm is not a mine collapse or a journey to the moon. Perhaps it is an unexpected life change, a painful loss, a dream that feels too big for you. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the mechanism that makes humans insuperable is within you, waiting for you to activate it. The extraordinary is not found in perfect conditions. It is found in the instinct to do whatever is necessary, even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if it scares you, even if it seems impossible. The insuperable mind is the one that, in darkness, like the miners, organizes its hope to survive. It is the one that, with few resources, like the Apollo 11 astronauts, dares to look beyond the known. It is the one that, like you, in your daily life, chooses each day a dream big enough to unsettle you, and at the same time, to motivate you. So when you close this book, don't think you have reached an end. think that you have just opened a new door. The journey continues, and the discomfort of your dreams is proof that you are moving in the right direction. Don't fear the vertigo, embrace it. Don't fear doubt, face it with focus. Don't fear the size of the challenge. Remember that limits are more fragile than they appear. Because being insuperable is not about reaching the top. It is about continuing to climb, even when you think you can't anymore. It is about understanding that discomfort is not an enemy, but an ally. It is about choosing dreams so big that, in chasing them, you transform into someone you never thought you could be. The journey continues, and now the next step is yours. You've listened to Unstoppable, The Mind That Achieves Everything, a work written by Oscar Gonzalez and produced by Biblio Studio. Dear listener, thank you very much for your visit. Greetings and blessings.